Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, you represent the Dallas area in Congress since 2023, and before that, you were in the state legislature. Why run for the U.S. Senate?
Yeah, right now we are at an interesting inflection point in our country, and we need someone who has bona fide fides when it comes to fighting for Texans in DC. And right now, the only way that we're going to be able to deliver on results that really help us, whether it's healthcare or whether it's jobs or whether it's the cost of housing and otherwise, is if we have someone who knows what they're doing, but has a little bit more power to actually get those policies across the finish line by running and representing in the United States Senate.
Talk about those policies a little bit. If elected, what would you say are your biggest priorities?
It has to be affordability, number one. But I am a civil rights lawyer, so democracy itself is on the line. And so, for sure, I want to make sure after Texas was specifically targeted with this redistricting scheme, that we can do something that the American people feel like is fair, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent. You want to make sure that you have a voice that represents you, that will fight for the health care, as Texas currently leads in uninsured in this country. We also know that the trade policies that are taking place as it relates to the tariffs are specifically hurting us more than others, especially our Texas farmers and ranchers. We know that Texas farmers and ranchers are experiencing record numbers of bankruptcy filings as well as suicides, because it is our exports that we rely on, whether you're a farmer, rancher, or just small or large business. We are one of the largest export states in the entire world. And so I want to make sure that we focus on those fiscal policies that will make housing affordable, that will make food affordable, that will make sure that child care and education and healthcare affordable. And I think it all starts with us rolling back these tariffs and making sure that those at the top pay their fair share.
You mentioned trade there a little bit. I want to get your thoughts on USMCA, United States, Canada, Mexico. That's a trade agreement that's currently in place. How effective do you view it? You're shaking your head. Doesn't seem like you're a fan.
No. I have never been against it. I am upset right now. I am upset right now because what's happened is Mexico and Canada have always been very good trade partners of ours, which is great, right? Because they are our neighbors to the north and the south. We know, when I talk about housing, that we get the vast majority of our lumber right there out of Canada. Right now, because of the hostilities that have come from the United States, whether it's threats to drop bombs over in Mexico or whether it's just the aggressive nature of the tariffs. Right now, Mexico and Canada are trying to work around the United States. That's not helpful to us. And we know that here recently, Canada announced that they actually plan to go to China to start doing some things. These are things that cannot be reversed overnight. And so that's why it is imperative that we start to reverse course immediately.
Well, I'm glad you clarified that. I don't want to put words in your mouth regarding the USMCA, but I just want to get a bit of clarity. Tariffs, say they're brought back to levels they were before President Trump took inauguration a second time. Do you feel as though that's the real big thing that would decrease prices for Americans, I should say?
I I think if we get it done quickly, I am watching the courts right now because we know that this is currently being litigated because I personally believe that he has exceeded his powers under the Constitution, just like I think there's been him exceeding powers as it relates to the war powers. I think that there's been him exceeding his powers as relates to the immigration policies. I think that he's exceeded his powers in a lot of different ways. And so I do think that it is important that we do something quickly. And if the legislature itself will not rein them in, then I'm hoping that the courts do something because, again, we know that some of these new trade partnerships that are coming to fruition won't just reverse themselves because we say, never mind, we were just playing, we're back now, and we want to play well with you.
Are tariffs something that could be tackled legislatively, you feel?
Yeah, absolutely. We know that the Senate has actually tried to deal with this and we didn't have the votes. That's why it's so important to make sure that we actually change the numbers. We know, or at least I know, in talking to a lot of my Republican colleagues, more so in the House, that there's a lot of things they don't agree with, but they are afraid of a similar fate that Marjorie Taylor Greene faced. If they come out and they come out against the president, then they may experience threats and things like that. So there are a lot of people, Republicans included, that believe that we need to rein the president in because taxing belongs to the Congress. And that is what tariffs are. That is within our exclusive power, just like declaring wars is within the exclusive power of the Congress, just like determining what appropriations look like. That is, again, exclusively, we have the power of the purse within the Congress.
I want to go back to policy in a little bit, but first, it's my understanding that you worked as a public defender here in East Texas. What did you
I
take away the
did.
most from that experience, and how will you apply that to the U.S. Senate?
I think that was the first time that I realized that we do have these broken systems. It was unfortunate that what actually thwarted me to want to get into politics was a case that I had of a 17-year-old. And most people don't realize that in the state of Texas, 17-year-olds are considered adults, but only for criminal justice purposes. We are only one of 5 states that do that. And unfortunately, this kid ended up with a felony conviction because he stole less than $20 worth of candy out of the concession stand at his high school. That was considered burglary of a building. That's when I really started to wonder, how did we get here and how did we fix it? That's when I first got my legislative bug.
If you had to tell voters about one bill you've authored or one vote you've taken you feel that defines you the most, what would you mention?
Ooh, that's a very good question that defines me the most. Um, I, I don't know about defining me the most. I will tell you that the Democracy Restoration Act, that is a bill that I authored that I really like for a lot of different reasons. So I'll go with that one. I've worked on a lot of legislation. I'm on over 1,000 pieces of legislation, but I'll say the Democracy Restoration Act because we literally just got done talking about criminal justice, and this particular act. It deals with those that have felonies on their record being able to participate in elections. And so I think with me feeling very strongly about making sure that the people have a voice in elections, especially as just this week, the president was talking about federalizing our elections. I am pushing back really strongly against that, and I want to make sure that we do everything to ensure that the power still remains with the people. So I'll go with that one, but there's a lot of deeper pieces of legislation that I have that I'm really drawn to.
Do you feel the people still have power in terms of voting today?
I do. I do feel as if their power is being diluted in this moment. We know that the maps that were passed in Texas, that was all about diluting the voices and the power of certain Texans. We know that there was a 160-page opinion that was written by a Trump appointed justice that called these maps out for what they were, unconstitutional and illegal. And unfortunately, our Supreme Court did not say that they disagreed. They just said we're going to allow these maps to go into place. We also know that recently the state of Texas sent our voter rolls up to DC. We also know that recently the administration said that they would leave Minneapolis if they would just send them their voter rolls. We also know that they went and got the voter rolls out of Georgia. So I think that it is important for us to be clear that democracy is something that is truly on the line, and that with every day that passes without us making sure that we fortify our democracy, our voices are being diminished.
You mentioned Minneapolis there in your answer, if I heard you correctly. Let's talk about ICE. Should ICE have any role in America today, in your view? Why or why not?
I think that the role of immigration enforcement is important. I don't think that this current iteration of ICE is what any of us believes is right. We know that even I think as early as or as late as today, the president said maybe it's a little too forceful. Maybe we need a softer approach. So even the president, with his own kind of policing force, is saying that they're going down the wrong way. I think that we should be a country of laws. And I think that right now our laws are being broken. Our Constitution is being violated consistently by ICE and others. And so I do think that we need to get back to the business of what immigration enforcement is supposed to be about. We've had different iterations of this. It used to be INS, that it was called. I think that if there's bad actors, we need to get them out of this country. I think that we need to fortify our border, but I look at, border security and immigration as two different kind of categories. If there's someone that is seeking asylum, then we need to make sure that we're processing those cases quickly, because if they have an actual asylum case, we need to go ahead and deal with that. If they don't, it is very difficult to ascertain whether or not they had a valid asylum case if it's like a decade later. That presents weaknesses for us in this country. So I think that we need to deal with immigration, but we also need to deal with security and enforcement. And right now, what we're seeing out of ICE is basically just violating people's constitutional rights. If you will recall, there recently was the court opinion that came out as it relates to Liam Ramos and his father. And so we had gone, myself and Joaquin Castro, we went to the Dilley facility. We visited with Liam, but we visited with hundreds of people and we saw so many other children. And so I want to be clear, the first question that I asked them when I got there was how many people are in this facility have committed crimes? And they said none. And so this is a violation of due process. Just imagine a policing force that comes in and then they just throw you in prison and then they figure out later whether or not you did something worthy of being thrown into prison.
What would be your message, to ICE officials across the country? Would you tell them to leave that area, whether it be in, Minnesota or other states, or would you say, would you have a different message to them?
No, I absolutely would tell them to get out. I would tell them to get
Everywhere?
back to the work. Oh, I would absolutely tell them to get out. Yeah. Because this is normally, let me explain how normally this should work because most people are not seeing that. Normally what you would do is you would conduct investigations, right? And so, you talked about my time as working as a public defender. When I was a public defender, there would be people that would end up having ICE holds placed on them because they would end up getting charged with certain crimes. And so even if they were going through the process the quote unquote right way, by the time you ended up being charged with violent offenses or what they would consider to be a deportable offense, which most of the time historically have been violent offenses, then they would put a hold and they would wait until there was a resolution on your case. I think that having that little bit of information is very valid, right? I think that if you're going to have somebody that is getting criminally justice implicated, then absolutely. But instead, what we see ICE doing is they're going into people's actual court hearings where they're showing up, they're doing what they're supposed to do, they've done everything like they were supposed to, and they're going to their court hearings. Or when they're going and they're checking in with the people that, think of it like probation, right? Like they're going to check in, making sure that they're doing everything they're supposed to. They're showing up to those appointments, right? That's not what ICE is supposed to do. We need them investigating, determining whether or not we've got cartels that are here and working with law enforcement and figuring out who it is that may be a part of these gangs that are coming from different countries, like keeping us safe from those people. And if somebody has a deportation order, regardless of why they're being deported, if they have a deportation order, then finding that person with the order and going and getting them. That's what they're supposed to do. They are not kind of like this standing policing, let me walk the streets and let me look for, say, a US citizen. They're not even supposed to be touching citizens, and now they're killing them. So I think that we leave our everyday policing up to actual police officers. We also know that these officers are making it a lot more difficult for what I consider to be our real officers. And I say that because they are not getting the same level of training that our typical police officers get. In fact, they shortened their training period. There's discrepancies about exactly the amount of time, but we're talking about 47 days. We know that they've admitted ultimately that they've shortened their time, and it's really dangerous for all of us. It's dangerous for officers, it's dangerous for individuals.
We actually do have a message here from the chat, if I may. Who is
Yep.
responsible for allowing our Texas voter rolls to go to D.C., and how can we hold them responsible? That's a question from our chat.
Those are our elected officials on the state level. Don't really know what to tell you. It is really sad. We know that in other states, like Minnesota, they did not give up the voter rolls. So I am encouraging everyone and I mean everyone, to just go ahead and re-register. Now, you can't register in time for the primaries, but I am concerned about what they're doing with our voter rolls and who it is that they are planning on targeting and kicking off of our voter rolls. So, in preparation for November, I am encouraging everyone, even if you know that you voted for the last 20 years and nothing has changed, even when you go to vote in the primary, go ahead and fill out another voter registration card and make sure that the most up to date information is on there to make sure that you're good to go in November.
I do want to ask you, you've drawn some attention for comments talking about other politicians. What is your response to voters who might be concerned about the words you've chosen to describe others?
Yeah, I think that what's most important to recognize is that I'm not your stereotypical politician. And so you can definitely blame me for never waking up and saying, you know what, my goal is to be some politico. I'm frustrated just like the vast majority of us. And frankly, the landscape of politics has completely changed. And so right now, what we see is a historic disapproval of both parties, yet there are certain individuals that people are feeling like they're fighting for them. So yes, I get frustrated and I don't stick to a script, but everything that you see is very real and authentic anger, fear over what is happening. And so just like, we can end up with a president of the United States that has said some of the most inflammatory things that we've ever heard, we can't then sit there and say, well, I'm going to play nice when, and we know that the president specifically loves to mention my name over and over and over. So I do think that right now it's about meeting the moment and it's about tapping into how people are really feeling, and people are mad, and so am I.
I do want to ask you, though, about two specific examples. I know you called Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. You said she had a beach blonde, bad built, butch body. And relating to Governor Greg Abbott here in Texas, you called him Governor Hot Wheels. Do you still stand by those comments?
I do. I
Why?
mean, listen, I mean, the reality is that I set them. And so, number one, when it came down to Marjorie, just so that everybody's got full context, Marjorie decided to do something that violated the rules. And frankly, she was supposed to be kicked out. And so, this was not a matter of Marjorie said something bad about me and then I immediately said something bad about her. I actually tried to follow the rules. We went ahead and went through the process that we are supposed to go through. And the chairman, Mr. Comer, decided that he wasn't going to follow the rules. And so, what I did, and the reason that I didn't get in trouble, is I posited a question because I wanted him to recognize how quickly things could devolve. And frankly, I don't think that you can say that you're fighting for the people, but then when somebody disrespects you, you just sit there and don't say anything, because that's why Democrats have been treated like doormats this entire time and why our democracy is falling apart. Is because we always want to be the nice guys instead of responding in kind. So that's that part. As it relates to the governor just rolled out his own uh gubernatorial whatever, and it literally says Governor Hot Wheels. So I mean, that is exactly what it says. You can go and Google it. And so I mean, the governor is calling himself that.
I do want to ask you, too. You're facing State Representative James Tallarico in this primary, which is on March 3rd, and early voting begins just less than 2 weeks on February 17th. Why do you believe
Yes.
you are best positioned to win in a general election?
Yeah, so the only nonpartisan public polling that's come out has said that I was better situated to win. That's number one. Number two, when you think about who people consider the swing voters to be, the voters that Democrats historically have been losing, they've been talking a lot about Latinos and us losing their votes. They've been talking a lot about losing African American men, and they have been talking about Democrats being the party of the educational elites and losing some of those that maybe don't have as much formal education. I am leading in all of those categories, right? And so I think that when we're trying to put back the coalition that is a winning coalition, then that's what it is. Number two, I think that we have to have somebody that we know exactly what happens when they get punched. Listen, I get punched every single day. And I think people are used to me getting attacked and punched. That is something that my opponent has not experienced, to know whether or not he's actually going to fall down or not. Number three, People right now, they want fighters, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent. They want you to fight for them and fight for more affordability, fight for their health care, fight for their Social Security. That's what they want. And so we know that my opponent has said that, but most people don't realize that my opponent has actually been elected longer than me. And the reason that people don't know who he is because he's never been on the front lines of these fights. So it's one thing to say you're a fighter, it's another thing to actually have it. And the final point that I'll say is that we have a historic number of people that are currently retiring from the House and the Senate. That is both Democrats and Republicans, because they literally don't know how to navigate this current environment of politics. It would literally be us taking a wild card versus who we know. If it's John Cornyn, guess what? I get to talk to John Cornyn about the bills that we've worked on together that have been passed into law. He's also a lawyer, just like I am. Same thing with Ken Paxton. If it's Ken Paxton, then you at least have somebody that actually has more experience on the federal level and is also a lawyer and can go toe to toe versus someone who is not a lawyer. And being a lawyer is so important, specifically in the Senate, because we're the ones that have oversight over the Supreme Court. We're the ones that confirm every federal judge as well as every cabinet nominee.
I'm cognizant of your time, so I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I do want to squeeze in a little bit of foreign policy, if I may. What, in your
Okay.
view, is the biggest threat facing America, and what would you do to solve it? And that's foreign threat, just so I can clarify.
I think the biggest threat that we're faced with is actually Donald Trump. I am concerned about his foreign policy as a whole. I think that it is only invoking more anger towards the United States. So we can start with, as soon as he was elected, Elon Musk was then put over this fictitious government agency that he called Doge. The first thing that they did is they cut off USAID. USAID was America's way of flexing our soft power for pennies on the dollar. This was building goodwill. When they improperly impounded those funds and cut those dollars off, there literally are deaths that have been linked to us cutting that funding because it was cut abruptly and it was cut illegally. So that's number one. Number two, whether you agree with who Maduro is or isn't, and whether or not you believe that he was the lawful president or otherwise, dropping bombs, going in and grabbing someone's president, illegitimate or otherwise, and then dragging him back to the United States while also stealing a country's oil reserves and then putting the monies into a foreign government's bank in Qatar, I think that that is problematic, especially since we know that this is something that Congress should be consulted about. Instead, they consulted oil tycoons instead of consulting with us. And with the Republicans in the House and the Senate failing to rein him in, to me it's given a permission structure, which is why Greenland is very nervous, which is why he's made the threats to Cuba, which is why he's made the threats to Mexico. This is a problem for us because we've got that part of it, and then the final other part, let me just say this so I can get through it. Foreign policy is a lot. Is how much he cozies up to Russia in this moment. And so, we know that historically we have been supporting the Ukrainians. With him deciding that he wants to basically side with Putin, the next move for Putin is to go into Poland. When him going into Poland, that is a NATO country, that means that our own troops, our brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, they end up with boots on the ground. And speaking of boots on the ground, he also bombed Nigeria on Christmas Day. And now, as of I think earlier this week, he decided that he was going to put boots on the ground in Nigeria. Listen, we can't fight the entire world at the same time. And frankly, he's picking fights that are absolutely unnecessary. It is stressing our troops, it is stretching our resources, and frankly, he's doing all of this while picking fights with these crazy tariffs with our actual friends. I don't believe that it is sound foreign policy for us to exist in this world by ourselves. We do have the strongest
So
army
then what
that you
can
could
you do
ever
as a
find.
U.S. Senator about that?
So the first thing is we need to rein them in. Listen, they've got two war powers resolutions that they've put on the floor. And sadly enough, what we saw is as one looked like it was going to go through and pass against him, he then made phone calls to Republicans, got some of the Republicans to back off, and then Vance came in and he cast the tie-breaking vote. We've got to get the numbers in the Senate, and flipping one of the Republican votes that we have that is in lockstep with him to a Democratic vote will actually be able to rein him in.
Congresswoman, is there anything I didn't ask you you'd like to tell our audience?
Listen, I'm an East Texas girl, y'all. So there will be those that will try to act like all I know is about the big city stuff. I know about the challenges that you face in rural Texas because I have faced them myself. I know what it is to wake up and smell the sulfur from international paper. I know what it is when there's a threat to shut down the Tyson plant or shut down the tire plant. I know these threats, and I also know what it is not to have that professional that I need, that medical professional need, and I have to go to Dallas or go to Shreveport to actually speak with someone. We should not have lesser access just because of our zip codes. And so, because I understand these challenges, because I served on the agriculture committee, I can tell you that I am the candidate that can fight the fight for all Texans. And frankly, even though I've been representing out of Dallas and Tarrant counties, I have been fighting this fight for all Texans. So, God bless you all. I'll see you out there on the trail. Make sure you get ready for early voting, which starts on February 17th.
Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Congresswoman, we appreciate you coming on the show today.
Absolutely. Have a good one.